In a small, quiet village surrounded by rolling hills and thick forests, life moved slowly. The villagers were simple people who knew each other's stories almost as well as their own. But there was one man whose story remained untold, a man named Elias Harper. He lived on the edge of the village in a modest house surrounded by overgrown bushes and tall trees that blocked most sunlight. To the villagers, he was just the quiet man. No one really knew much about him except that he had arrived 30 years ago with nothing more than a suitcase and a somber expression. Elias kept to himself. He rarely spoke, and when he did, it was only to give short answers or polite nods. His silence made some people uneasy, but others admired him for it, believing it to be a sign of wisdom. Over time, he became part of the scenery, a shadowy figure people acknowledged but didn't bother to understand. Children sometimes whispered about him during playtime, imagining all sorts of tales. Was he hiding treasure? Had he been a soldier? Did he have magical powers? Their imaginations ran wild, but no one ever dared ask him directly. Every evening, Elias would sit by his window, staring out into the distance as if waiting for something or someone to return. Sometimes he held an old photograph in his hand, tracing its edges gently with his fingers. On rainy days, smoke curled from his chimney, and faint music drifted through the cracks of his closed shutters. It was melancholy music, the kind that tugged at your heartstrings without you knowing why. But even then, Elias never invited anyone inside. He preferred solitude, and the villagers respected that, at least outwardly. Despite his reclusive nature, Elias wasn't disliked. In fact, many felt sorry for him. They assumed he must have suffered some great loss in his past, though no one could say what it was. Occasionally, neighbors left baskets of food on his doorstep, hoping to ease whatever burden weighed so heavily on him. Elias always accepted these gifts quietly, nodding his thanks but never offering explanations. Some wondered if he even noticed their kindness, while others believed he simply chose not to acknowledge it. One winter morning, however, everything changed. Elias failed to appear at his usual spot by the window. Days passed, and still, there was no sign of him. Concerned, a few villagers decided to check on him. When they knocked on his door, there was no answer. Peering through the windows, they saw dust gathering on furniture and dishes piled up in the sink. Something was wrong. Finally, summoning courage, they broke down the door and stepped inside. The house smelled stale, as though it hadn't been aired out in weeks. Cobwebs clung to the corners of the ceiling and shadows lingered in every room. In the bedroom, they found Elias lying motionless on his bed, his face peaceful yet pale. He had died alone, surrounded by silence, the same silence he had carried throughout his life. There were no signs of struggle or illness. It seemed as though his body had simply given up. News of Elias's death spread quickly through the village. People gathered outside his home, murmuring softly among themselves. What would happen now? Who would take care of his belongings? More importantly, who would bury him? After some discussion, the villagers agreed to pool their resources and give him a proper burial. Though he had no family or close friends, they felt it was the right thing to do. On the day of the funeral, a small group gathered at the cemetery. The grave was dug near the edge where fewer people visited. It wasn't neglect. It was just how things were done when someone died without ties. As the earth swallowed Elias Harper whole, so too did it swallow whatever secrets he had kept, hidden all these years, or so everyone thought. But fate has a way of revealing truths buried deep beneath the surface. Years later, a fierce storm swept through the village, bringing torrential rains that flooded rivers and turned roads into mud. The cemetery wasn't spared either. One morning, after days of relentless rain, a farmer walking through the graveyard noticed something unusual poking out of the ground near Elias's grave. At first glance, it looked like tree roots exposed by erosion, but upon closer inspection, it was clear this was no ordinary root. It was wood, a splintered corner of what appeared to be a box. Word spread quickly among the villagers, drawing curious eyes to the site. By midday, a crowd had gathered around the disturbed grave, murmuring nervously about disturbing the dead. Some suggested calling the authorities, while others argued against it, fearing it would bring trouble. Eventually, curiosity won over superstition. Armed with shovels, a few brave souls began digging cautiously around the area. What they uncovered shocked them all. Beneath Elias Harper's coffin lay another box, a smaller, intricately carved wooden chest sealed tightly shut. The discovery sent ripples of excitement and unease through the village. Whispers filled the air as people speculated about the contents of the chest. Could it hold treasure, a map leading to riches, or perhaps something darker, a curse meant to punish those who disturbed the grave? Whatever it was clear that Elias Harper had taken this secret to his deathbed, leaving behind a mystery that begged to be solved. As the villagers stood around the open grave, staring at the mysterious chest, they couldn't help but wonder, what kind of man was Elias Harper, really? And what had he been hiding all these years? Little did they know. Uncovering the truth would change their lives forever and force them to confront emotions they had long buried within themselves. The discovery of the wooden chest beneath Elias Harper's grave sent shockwaves through the village. For days, people talked about nothing else. Speculation ran rampant. Some believed it held treasure, others thought it might contain cursed artifacts, and a few even joked that it was filled with old socks or useless trinkets. But whatever the truth, the chest had awakened something in the villagers. Curiosity mingled with fear. It was as if the storm that unearthed the box had also stirred up buried feelings within them. After much debate, the decision was made to open the chest. The village elder, a wise but cautious man named Mr. Alden, took charge of the situation. He gathered a small group of trusted individuals, a mix of curious teenagers, skeptical adults, and one elderly woman who claimed she could sense spirits, to witness the unveiling. They met at the cemetery late in the afternoon when the sun cast long shadows across the gravestones, giving the scene an eerie yet solemn atmosphere. With trembling hands, Mr. Alden placed the chest on a makeshift table constructed from planks of wood. The carvings on its surface were intricate, almost hypnotic, depicting swirling patterns and symbols that none of them recognized. Some whispered that the designs looked ancient, possibly belonging to a culture far removed from their own. Others dismissed this notion, arguing it was just fancy craftsmanship. Regardless, the chest exuded an aura of mystery that made everyone uneasy. "Should we really be doing this?" asked Mary, a young mother who had joined the group out of morbid curiosity. Her voice trembled slightly, betraying her nervousness. What if it's cursed?" Mr. Alden gave her a reassuring smile, though his eyes betrayed his own apprehension. "We won't know unless we look," he replied gently. "Besides, it belongs to Elias now, and he's gone. Whatever's inside is meant for us to find." His words did little to calm the group, but they nodded reluctantly, agreeing to proceed. Using a rusted pocket knife, Mr. Alden carefully pried open the lid. The hinges creaked loudly, breaking the silence like a scream. Everyone leaned forward, holding their breath as the contents of the chest came into view. To their surprise and slight disappointment, there were no jewels, no gold, coins, no maps leading to hidden riches. Instead, the chest contained stacks of yellowed papers tied neatly with string, along with a single black and white photograph. The air seemed to grow heavier as Mr. Alden picked up the photograph and examined it closely. It showed a young woman, standing beside a child, her face radiant despite the grainy quality of the image. Scrawled on the back were 2 words written in faded ink: "Forgive me." A murmur rippled through the group. Who was the woman? And why had Elias written such a poignant message? As Mr. Alden began sifting through the papers, the answer slowly emerged. Each document was a letter, dozens of them, all addressed to someone named Margaret Harper. At the top of each page, the salutation read, "Dear Maggie," followed by heartfelt words filled with regret, sorrow, and longing. "These are letters of apology," Mr. Alden said softly, his voice tinged with awe. Elias wrote these to someone he loved deeply. As the group listened intently, he read passages aloud. One letter described how Elias missed hearing Maggie's laughter and seeing her smile. Another recounted memories of happier times, Their wedding day, family picnics, lazy afternoons spent reading together. Yet another spoke of guilt, raw and unrelenting, over a tragedy that had shattered their lives. Though the exact details weren't clear, it became evident that Elias blamed himself for something terrible that had happened to Maggie and the child in the photograph. Among the letters were other items: newspaper clippings reporting a car accident decades earlier, receipts for anonymous donations to charities supporting families affected by road accidents, and handwritten notes detailing dates and locations. Slowly, the pieces of the puzzle began to fit together. This wasn't just any secret. It was a confession, a lifetime of guilt locked away and forgotten. The villagers sat in stunned silence, absorbing the weight of what they had uncovered. Here was a man who had lived among them for 30 years, carrying a burden so heavy that it had defined his entire existence. Yet not once had he shared his pain with anyone. Instead, he had chosen isolation, punishing himself silently while the world moved on around him. Mary wiped tears from her eyes as she stared at the photograph. "Who were they?" she asked quietly. "And what happened to them?" No one had an immediate answer, but Mr. Alden suspected the truth lay in the newspaper clippings. Carefully unfolding one, he scanned the article. It told the story of a fatal car crash that occurred during a rainstorm many years ago. A mother and her young daughter had drowned after their vehicle skidded off a slippery road and plunged into a river. The names of the victims were listed: Margaret Harper and Sarah Harper. Gasps echoed through the group as realization dawned. The woman in the photograph was Margaret, and the child was Sarah, Elias's wife and daughter. The tragedy must have been unbearable for him, driving him to leave everything behind and start anew in the village. Yet even here, surrounded by strangers, he couldn't escape the ghosts of his past. Every evening he spent staring out the window, every note he wrote but never sent, every act of charity he performed anonymously. It was all part of his attempt to seek forgiveness. For hours, the group pored over the documents, piecing together Elias's story. By the time night fell, they had uncovered enough to understand the depth of his suffering. But instead of feeling satisfied, they felt a profound sadness. How could a man carry such a heavy burden alone for so long? Why hadn't anyone noticed his pain? As they packed up the chest and prepared to leave the cemetery, a strange sense of responsibility settled over them. They realized that Elias's secret wasn't just his. It belonged to the village now. It was up to them to honor his memory and ensure that his story didn't fade into obscurity. Over the next few days, the villagers debated what to do next. Some suggested contacting distant relatives of Elias, hoping to reunite the letters and photograph with surviving family members. Others proposed organizing a memorial service to pay tribute to Margaret and Sarah. Eventually, they decided on both courses of action, determined to give closure to a man who had sought it in vain. Meanwhile, word of the discovery spread beyond the village. Neighboring townsfolk came to see the chest and hear the story firsthand. Journalists arrived, eager to document the tale, and filmmakers expressed interest in turning it into a documentary. What had once been a sleepy, unremarkable village was suddenly thrust into the spotlight. But for the villagers themselves, the impact ran deeper than fame or attention. They began to reflect on their own lives, questioning whether they truly knew the people around them, or if there were secrets lurking beneath the surface waiting to be uncovered. Inspired by Elias's story, they made a conscious effort to connect more deeply with one another, sharing meals, exchanging stories, and ensuring no one felt as isolated as Elias had. In the weeks that followed, the village transformed in subtle yet meaningful ways. Strangers became friends, barriers crumbled, and a newfound sense of unity blossomed. Even the weather seemed kinder now, with sunny days outnumbering storms. And though Elias Harper had carried his secret to the grave, the truth set free by the rain ultimately healed not only his soul, but also the hearts of those who dared to uncover it. By the time the memorial service was held, the entire village had come together to honor Elias, Margaret, and Sarah. Together, they planted flowers around the gravesite, creating a vibrant garden that transformed the once-forgotten corner into a place of beauty and reflection. It was as if the village itself had collectively decided to forgive Elias, offering him the closure he sought but never found in life. And so, what began as a grim discovery amid torrential rains ended as a testament to humanity's capacity for compassion. Elias Harper's story served as a reminder that behind every closed door and guarded heart lies a story worth hearing, and that sometimes the greatest act of kindness is simply listening. The memorial service for Elias Harper, Margaret, and Sarah became a turning point for the village. It wasn't just an event to honor the dead, it was a moment of collective healing, a chance for the villagers to confront their own fears, regrets, and misunderstandings. The day dawned bright and clear, as if nature itself had conspired to create a fitting backdrop for what promised to be a deeply emotional gathering. People from neighboring towns joined the villagers, swelling the crowd to numbers no one had anticipated. For a community that prided itself on quiet simplicity, this sudden influx of attention felt overwhelming, but also strangely comforting. The ceremony took place in the cemetery, where the gravesite had been transformed into a vibrant garden. Flowers of every color bloomed around the edges, their petals glistening with dew. A small stone monument stood at the center, engraved with the names Margaret Harper and Sarah Harper, along with the phrase, "Loved forever, remembered, always." Beneath it, a plaque bore the inscription, "Forgiveness begins where love remains." These words resonated deeply with everyone present, capturing the essence of Elias's story and the lessons they had learned from it. As the villagers gathered around the monument, there was an unspoken understanding that this was more than just a tribute to 3 lives lost. It was a reckoning with the past, a way to acknowledge pain and guilt without judgment. Mr. Alden, the village elder, stepped forward to speak. His voice was steady but tinged with emotion as he recounted the discovery of the chest and the secrets it held. He read excerpts from Elias's letters aloud, his tone softening when he reached the parts where Elias pleaded for forgiveness. Elias carried this burden alone for 30 years, Mr. Alden said, pausing to look at the faces before him. He lived among us, yet we never truly saw him. We assumed he was content in his solitude, but beneath that quiet exterior was a man consumed by regret. Today we honor not only his memory, but also the memories of those he loved and lost. When he finished speaking, a silence fell over the crowd. It was broken only by the rustling of leaves and the distant chirping of birds. Then, one by one, people began sharing their thoughts. Some spoke about how Elias's story had made them reflect on their own lives, while others expressed gratitude for the reminder to cherish their loved ones. A young girl stepped forward timidly, clutching a bouquet of wildflowers she had picked earlier that morning. She placed them gently at the base of the monument and whispered, "I'm sorry you were so sad, Mr. Harper. I hope you're happy now." Her words brought tears to many eyes, including Mary's, the young mother who had initially feared opening the chest. She stood beside her own children, holding their hands tightly as she listened to the speeches. Earlier that week, she had admitted to her husband that Elias's story had shaken her. "What if I'm missing something important in my own family?" she had asked. "What if someone close to me is hurting and I don't even notice?" Her husband had hugged her, then reminding her that awareness was the first step toward change. Now standing amidst the crowd, Mary resolved to pay closer attention, to listen more, judge less, and love harder. By the end of the service, the atmosphere had shifted. There was still sadness, of course, but it was tempered by hope. As people lingered near the gravesite, exchanging stories and laughter, it became clear that Elias's legacy was far greater than anyone could have imagined. He had forced the villagers to confront uncomfortable truths, not just about him but about themselves, and in doing so, he had brought them closer together. A ripple effect. In the weeks following the memorial service, the ripple effects of Elias's story continued to spread. Journalists wrote articles, filmmakers visited the village to document its transformation, and strangers came from miles away to pay their respects. The once obscure gravesite became a symbol of redemption and the power of forgiveness, not just for others, but for oneself. People left flowers, notes, and small tokens of remembrance, turning the area into a living tribute to love, loss, and healing. But the impact went beyond symbolism. The villagers found themselves changed in profound ways. Conversations that had once been superficial now delved deeper, touching on topics like vulnerability, empathy, and connection. Neighbors who had barely spoken before began inviting each other over for tea or helping with chores. Even the children noticed the shift. They played together more often, sharing secrets and dreams under the watchful eyes of adults who finally understood the importance of fostering meaningful relationships. One particularly touching development came from the local school. Inspired by Elias's letters, the teachers decided to incorporate storytelling into their curriculum. They encouraged students to write letters to imaginary recipients, expressing emotions they might otherwise keep bottled up. Some kids wrote to parents they wished would spend more time with them. Others addressed friends they had wronged or siblings they envied. The exercise proved cathartic, allowing the children to process their feelings in a safe environment. When the letters were shared during class with permission, it sparked conversations that bridged gaps between classmates and fostered a sense of unity. The adults weren't immune to these exercises either. One evening, the village held a storytelling night in the community hall. Everyone was invited to share a personal anecdote, something joyful, painful, or transformative. At first, the room was tense, with people shuffling uncomfortably in their seats. But when Mr. Alden kicked things off by recounting a childhood mistake he still regretted, the ice broke. Others followed suit, revealing pieces of themselves they had kept hidden for years. By the end of the night, hugs were exchanged, tears were shed, and promises were made to support one another moving forward. Finding closure. Amid all this change, the villagers couldn't help but wonder, what would Elias think if he could see them now? Would he feel vindicated knowing his secret had brought people together? Or would he retreat further into himself, overwhelmed by the attention? Though they would never know for sure, they chose to believe that he would approve. After all, his final act, burying the chest with its trove of letters and memories, had been a silent plea for understanding. And in uncovering it, they had granted him the closure he sought. To ensure his story endured, the villagers created a small museum in the community hall dedicated to Elias Harper. Inside, visitors could view replicas of the letters, the photograph of Margaret and Sarah, and artifacts related to the memorial service. A guest book allowed people to leave messages reflecting on how Elias's journey had touched their lives. Over time, the entries grew into a tapestry of human experience, stories of forgiveness, reconciliation, and second chances. Even the weather seemed to mirror the village's transformation. Gone were the relentless storms that had unearthed the chest. Instead, gentle rains nourished the gardens and sunshine bathed the hillsides in golden light. Life moved at its usual unhurried pace, but now there was a warmth to it, a sense of purpose that hadn't existed before. A new chapter. For Mary, the changes were especially poignant. She had always considered herself a good mother, but Elias's story made her realize how easy it was to take loved ones for granted. Determined to do better, she started spending quality time with her children, asking about their days and listening intently to their answers. She also reconnected with her estranged sister, reaching out after years of silence. Their initial conversation was awkward, filled with hesitations and half-formed apologies, but it marked the beginning of a fragile yet hopeful reconciliation. Other villagers experienced similar breakthroughs. Old grudges dissolved, friendships deepened, and acts of kindness multiplied. The village became known not just for its picturesque beauty, but also for its spirit of compassion. Tourists who visited remarked on how welcoming everyone was, how eager they seemed to share their stories and make connections. And so, what had begun as a grim discovery amid torrential rains ended as a testament to humanity's capacity for growth and renewal. Elias Harper's secret had lain buried for decades, but when it was finally revealed, it illuminated the hearts of those who uncovered it. Through his pain, they found strength. Through his isolation, they discovered community. And through his longing for forgiveness, they embraced the power of love. Though Elias Harper had carried his guilt to the grave, the truth set free by the rain ultimately healed not only his soul, but also the hearts of those who dared to uncover it. In honoring his memory, the villagers ensured that his legacy would live on, not as a tale of sorrow, but as a beacon of hope for generations to come. The story of Elias Harper continued to ripple outward, touching lives far beyond the boundaries of the small village. What had started as a local mystery, the discovery of a chest buried beneath his grave, had grown into something much larger, a symbol of redemption, forgiveness, and the enduring power of human connection. The villagers, once content in their quiet routines, found themselves at the center of a movement they never could have predicted. And yet it wasn't fame or recognition that drove them forward. It was a shared understanding that Elias's secret had revealed something universal about the human condition. A story that traveled far. Word of the discovery spread quickly, thanks in part to journalists who wrote articles detailing the events surrounding Elias's hidden past. One reporter, a young woman named Clara Bennett, became particularly invested in telling Elias's story. She spent weeks interviewing villagers, poring over the letters from the chest, and researching the car accident that had claimed Margaret and Sarah's lives. Her article, titled "Buried Secrets Unearthed Hearts," and went viral, capturing the attention of readers across the country. Clara's writing struck a chord because it wasn't just about Elias. It was about the lessons his story imparted. She described how the villagers had come together to honor his memory, transforming grief into action and isolation into community. Her words painted a vivid picture of a place where people chose empathy over indifference, where they embraced vulnerability rather than shying away from it. Readers were moved to tears, many commenting that the story felt like a mirror reflecting their own struggles with loss, guilt, and forgiveness. Soon after the article was published, filmmakers approached the village with an offer to create a documentary based on Elias's life and legacy. At first, the villagers hesitated. They worried that turning their experience into entertainment might cheapen its significance. But after meeting the filmmakers, a husband and wife team known for their sensitive storytelling, they agreed to participate. The couple promised to handle the project with care, ensuring that Elias's story remained authentic and respectful. Filming began during the spring, when the flowers planted around the gravesite were in full bloom. Cameras captured the vibrant colors of the garden, the weathered faces of the villagers, and the handwritten notes left by visitors. Interviews revealed raw emotions. Mary spoke candidly about how Elias's story had changed her relationship with her children. Mr. Alden reflected on the weight of uncovering such a deeply personal secret. Even the children chimed in, describing how the storytelling exercises at school had helped them express feelings they'd previously kept bottled up. When the documentary premiered months later, it received widespread acclaim. Critics praised its honest portrayal of grief and healing, while audiences marveled at the resilience of the villagers. The film ended with a poignant scene, a group of children planting new flowers around the monument, their laughter echoing through the cemetery. It was a reminder that life and love always finds a way to grow, even in the shadow of tragedy. Unexpected connections. As the story gained national attention, strangers began reaching out to the village, sharing their own experiences of loss and forgiveness. Some sent letters, others visited in person, but all expressed gratitude for the courage shown by the villagers in confronting Elias's secret. Among these visitors was a man named Thomas Reed, who traveled from a distant city to see the gravesite for himself. Thomas arrived unannounced one rainy afternoon, carrying a worn leather satchel and wearing an expression of quiet determination. When asked why he had come, he hesitated before speaking. "I think I knew Elias," he said finally. "At least I knew someone who might have been him." Intrigued, the villagers invited Thomas to stay and share his story. Over dinner that evening, he explained that decades earlier, he had worked alongside a man fitting Elias's description at a factory in another town. The two weren't close friends, but Thomas remembered Elias as being unusually reserved, often disappearing during breaks to sit alone and write in a notebook. In the chaos, time. Thomas hadn't thought much of it, assuming Elias simply preferred solitude. Now, however, he wondered if those moments of quiet reflection had been spent penning the very letters uncovered in the chest. Though Thomas couldn't confirm whether the man he knew was indeed Elias Harper, his visit sparked further curiosity among the villagers. Could Elias have left behind traces of his presence elsewhere? Were there other secrets waiting to be discovered? These questions lingered in their minds, fueling a renewed sense of wonder about the man who had lived among them for so long without revealing his true self. Lessons learned. For the villagers, the aftermath of Elias's story served as both a lesson and a challenge. They had learned the importance of looking beyond surface appearances, of recognizing that everyone carries burdens invisible to the naked eye. But they also realized that awareness alone wasn't enough. It required action, compassion, and a willingness to step outside their comfort zones. One initiative born from this realization was the creation of a support group called Voices Unspoken. Led by Mary and a few other women in the village, the group provided a safe space for people to share their struggles without fear of judgment. Whether it was coping with grief, dealing with strained relationships, or simply feeling overwhelmed by life's demands, members found solace in knowing they weren't alone. The sessions were informal, often held in cozy living rooms with cups of tea and plates of homemade cookies. Yet the impact was profound, helping participants confront their pain and begin the journey toward healing. Another significant change came in the form of community projects aimed at fostering connection. The villagers organized regular gatherings, potlucks, game nights, and outdoor festivals that encouraged interaction between generations. Elders shared stories of the past, while younger residents introduced new ideas and technologies. These exchanges bridged gaps that had existed for years, creating a sense of unity that transcended age, background, and circumstance. Even the cemetery, once a somber place associated with death and loss, became a site of celebration. Families brought picnics to enjoy near the graves of loved ones. Children played tag among the headstones, and musicians performed impromptu concerts under the shade of ancient trees. The transformation was subtle but powerful, turning a space of mourning into one of remembrance and joy. A legacy of forgiveness. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Elias's story was its ability to inspire forgiveness, not just for others, but for oneself. Many villagers admitted that they had carried grudges or regrets for years, unable to let go of past hurts. But witnessing Elias's lifelong struggle with guilt made them realize the futility of holding on to anger. Slowly, they began extending olive branches to estranged relatives, apologizing for old mistakes and mending broken bonds. Mr. Alden, for instance, reached out to a childhood friend he hadn't spoken to in decades. Their falling out had been over something trivial, yet neither had ever mustered the courage to apologize. When Mr. Alden finally picked up the phone, his voice cracked with emotion as he uttered the words, "I'm sorry." To his relief, his friend responded in kind, and the two rekindled their friendship as though no time had passed. Similarly, Mary reconciled with her sister, inviting her to visit the village for the first time in years. Though their initial reunion was awkward, filled with tentative smiles and hesitant conversations, it marked the beginning of a new chapter in their relationship. Together they visited the gravesite, leaving flowers in memory of Margaret and Sarah. As they stood side by side, Mary felt a weight lift from her shoulders, a weight she hadn't even realized she'd been carrying. A village transformed. By the end of the year, the village bore little resemblance to the sleepy, isolated community it had once been. Its people were more open, more connected, and more willing to embrace vulnerability. Strangers passing through remarked on the warmth and kindness of the villagers, noting how eager they seemed to share their stories and make connections. Even, the landscape seemed brighter, with wildflowers blooming along roadsides and laughter echoing through the streets. Yet despite these changes, the villagers remained grounded in their roots. They understood that growth didn't mean forgetting where they came from. It meant building upon the foundation laid by those who had walked before them. And in honoring Elias Harper's memory, they ensured that his legacy would live on, not as a tale of sorrow, but as a beacon of hope for generations to come. Elias had carried his secret to the grave, but the truth set free by the rain ultimately healed not only his soul but also the hearts of those who dared to uncover it. Through his pain they found strength, through his isolation they discovered community, and through his longing for forgiveness they embraced the power of love. In doing so, they proved that even the darkest secrets can lead to light, if only we have the courage to face them. The story of Elias Harper had become more than just a tale. It was now a living, breathing part of the village's identity. What began as a quiet man's secret buried beneath the earth had blossomed into a movement that touched every corner of their lives. The villagers, once bound by routines and silence, found themselves transformed in ways they never imagined. They had learned to listen, to forgive, and to connect, not only with each other but also with their own vulnerabilities. And yet the journey wasn't over. The impact of Elias's legacy continued to unfold, revealing new layers of meaning and inspiring acts of kindness that reached far beyond the boundaries of their small community. A ripple beyond the village. As news of Elias's story spread further, it resonated with people from all walks of life. Letters poured in from across the country, many written by strangers who felt compelled to share their own experiences of loss, guilt, or redemption. Some recounted stories of loved ones they had lost too soon. Others spoke of regrets they carried like heavy stones in their hearts. One letter in particular stood out, a heartfelt note from a woman named Grace Miller, whose husband had died in a car accident similar to the one that claimed Margaret and Sarah's lives. Grace explained that she had struggled for years to forgive herself for surviving when her husband hadn't. Reading about Elias's letters and his lifelong quest for forgiveness gave her hope that healing was possible. Encouraged by the villagers' example, she decided to visit the gravesite personally, bringing with her a journal filled with entries she had written to her late husband over the years. Standing before the monument dedicated to Margaret and Sarah, Grace read aloud from her journal, tears streaming down her face. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "I'm sorry I couldn't save you, but I promised to live fully because that's what you would have wanted." Her visit inspired others to follow suit. Over the next few months, the village welcomed dozens of visitors seeking solace and closure. Each person left behind something meaningful: a flower, a photograph, a handwritten note, transforming the cemetery into a mosaic of shared grief and hope. The villagers embraced these strangers with open arms, offering them tea, conversation, and a listening ear. In doing so, they reinforced the idea that pain is universal, but so is the capacity for healing. Acts of kindness multiply. Inspired by Elias's anonymous acts of charity, the villagers launched initiatives aimed at helping those in need. They established a fund called Elias's Legacy, using donations from visitors and locals alike to support families affected by road accidents, provide scholarships for children, and plant trees in memory of those lost too soon. Every tree planted bore a plaque engraved with a name, creating a forest of remembrance that stretched across the hills surrounding the village. One such initiative involved organizing an annual event called Day of Compassion. On this day, villagers came together to perform random acts of kindness, from baking cookies for neighbors to volunteering at shelters in nearby towns. Children played a key role, encouraged to think of creative ways to make someone's day brighter. One little boy named Tommy decided to paint rocks with cheerful messages and leave them along walking trails. His simple gesture brought smiles to countless faces, proving that even the smallest acts of kindness could have a profound impact. The spirit of generosity extended beyond material actions. People began prioritizing emotional support, checking in on friends and family members regularly. Mary, for instance, started hosting weekly coffee mornings where women could gather to discuss challenges they faced without fear of judgment. These informal sessions often led to deep conversations about mental health, parenting struggles, and relationship issues. Though not everyone had solutions, simply knowing they weren't alone made a world of difference. Healing through. Artists' art became another powerful outlet for expression and healing. Inspired by the documentary filmmakers, several villagers took up painting, writing, and music as ways to process their emotions. A local artist named Emma organized an exhibition titled Unspoken Words, featuring works inspired by Elias's letters and the themes of forgiveness and love. One painting depicted a lone figure standing under a stormy sky, holding an open chest overflowing with light, a metaphor for the secrets we carry and the liberation that comes with sharing them. Poetry. Readings also gained popularity, with villagers reciting original pieces during gatherings. One evening, Mr. Alden surprised everyone by reading a poem he had written about Elias, titled The Quiet Man Speaks. It captured the essence of Elias's journey. Beneath the soil where secrets sleep, a silent man kept watch so deep, his heart held burdens none could see until the rain set truth free. Now flowers bloom where shadows fell, and whispers rise where silence dwelled. Forgiveness blooms, its roots take hold, a quiet man's story retold. The applause that followed was heartfelt and prolonged, a testament to how deeply Elias's story had touched them all. A new generation learns. Perhaps the most enduring change occurred among the children of the village. Educators incorporated lessons about empathy, resilience, and forgiveness into their curriculum, ensuring that future generations understood the importance of connection and compassion. Storytelling exercises introduced earlier became a permanent fixture, allowing students to explore their feelings creatively. Teachers noticed a shift in behavior. Children were kinder, more patient, and eager to help one another. One project involved creating a memory wall at the school, where students pinned notes honoring loved ones they had lost or expressing gratitude for those still with them. The wall quickly filled with colorful papers bearing messages like, "I miss your laugh, Grandma," and "Thank you, Mom, for always believing in me." It served as a reminder that memories, whether joyful or painful, shape who we are and bind us together. Even outside the classroom, children embraced the values instilled by Elias's story. Tommy, the boy who painted rocks, convinced his classmates to join him in decorating sidewalks with chalk drawings and uplifting messages. Another group organized a toy drive for underprivileged kids in neighboring towns, collecting enough items to fill an entire truck. Watching these young minds grow into compassionate individuals filled the villagers with pride and optimism for the future. A village united. By the end of the year, the village had undergone a remarkable transformation. Its people were no longer just neighbors. They were a family united by shared experiences and a commitment to supporting one another. Strangers passing through remarked on the warmth and openness of the villagers, noting how easily conversations flowed and how genuinely people cared for one another. Even disagreements which inevitably arose were resolved with patience and understanding, rather than anger or resentment. The cemetery, once a place associated solely with death, had become a symbol of life and renewal. Families visited regularly, not just to mourn but to celebrate the memories of those who had shaped their lives. Wildflowers bloomed around headstones, birds sang in the trees, and laughter echoed through the air. It was a testament to the power of love and forgiveness to turn even the darkest places into sources of light. Elias's final gift. Though Elias Harper had lived a life marked by guilt and isolation, his legacy proved to be one of connection and healing. Through his letters and the secrets he carried, he taught the villagers and countless others that forgiveness begins within. By choosing to honor his memory, they had discovered the strength to confront their own pain and extend grace to others. In the end, Elias's story served as a reminder that no secret is too heavy to bear if shared, no wound too deep to heal if tended with care. He had given the villagers a gift far greater than treasure or riches. He had shown them the transformative power of love, forgiveness, and human connection. And in doing so, he ensured that his quiet life would continue to inspire generations to come. The story of Elias Harper had woven itself into the fabric of the village, becoming a thread that connected past and present, sorrow and hope. What began as a single man's secret buried beneath the earth had grown into a tapestry of shared experiences, lessons, and transformations. The villagers, once content in their quiet routines, now found themselves living with a deeper awareness of life's complexities and its possibilities. They had learned to see beyond appearances, to listen without judgment, and to embrace vulnerability as a source of strength. But the journey didn't end there. As time passed, Elias's legacy continued to ripple outward, touching lives far beyond what anyone could have imagined. A new year, a new beginning. The new year arrived with a crispness in the air, promising fresh starts and renewed purpose. For the villagers, it marked not just the passage of time, but also an opportunity to reflect on how far they had come since uncovering Elias's secret. The changes weren't always visible. There were no grand monuments or sweeping reforms, but they were felt in subtle yet profound ways. Conversations flowed more easily, smiles came more readily, and acts of kindness multiplied like ripples in a pond. One tradition that emerged was the annual Day of Reflection, held on the anniversary of the storm that unearthed Elias's chest. On this day, villagers gathered at the cemetery to honor his memory and celebrate the connections forged because of his story. It wasn't a somber occasion. Instead, it was filled with laughter, music, and storytelling. Children played games near the gravesite, their laughter mingling with the rustling leaves while adults exchanged stories of growth and gratitude. This year, Mary stood before the crowd, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. "When we found that chest, I thought it was just an old box full of papers," she said, clutching her youngest child's hand. "But it turned out to be so much more. It taught us to look closer, to ask questions, and to care for each other, in ways we never did before. Elias gave us a gift, not gold or treasures, but something far greater, the chance to heal." Her words resonated deeply, drawing nods and murmurs of agreement from the crowd. People clapped softly, their applause carrying a sense of unity and understanding. Afterward, everyone placed flowers around the monument, creating a vibrant circle of color that seemed to glow even in the fading light. Inspiring others across the world. As news of the village's transformation spread, it inspired communities far beyond its borders. Journalists revisited the story, publishing follow-up articles that highlighted the ongoing impact of Elias's legacy. One piece, titled "From Secrets to Solidarity," featured interviews with villagers who described how their lives had changed since uncovering the chest. Readers were moved by their honesty and resilience, many commenting that the story reminded them of the importance of forgiveness, not just for others, but for themselves. The documentary about Elias's life gained international recognition, winning awards at film festivals and sparking discussions about grief, guilt, and redemption. Audiences around the world watched with tears in their eyes, marveling at how a small village had turned tragedy into triumph. Social media buzzed with hashtags like Forgiveness Journey and Elias Legacy, as people shared their own stories of loss and healing. Some even traveled to the village, hoping to experience firsthand the spirit of compassion that had taken root there. Among these visitors was a woman named Rachel Chen, a psychologist specializing in trauma and grief. She'd been deeply moved by the documentary and wanted to understand how the villagers had managed to transform pain into connection. During her visit, she observed their interactions closely, noting how openly they discussed difficult emotions and supported one another. Inspired by what she saw, Rachel decided to write a book exploring the psychological principles behind their healing process. Titled The Ripple Effect: How Forgiveness Heals Communities. The book became a bestseller, offering practical advice for fostering empathy and resilience in everyday life. Acts of kindness spread farther. Fueled by Elias's example, the villagers expanded their efforts to help those in need. The Elias Legacy Fund grew exponentially, thanks to donations from across the globe. With the additional resources, they launched programs aimed at addressing issues like mental health, education, and environmental conservation. Volunteers traveled to neighboring towns to assist with disaster relief efforts, while local schools partnered with organizations to provide mentorship opportunities for underprivileged youth. One particularly impactful initiative involved planting trees along highways and roadsides, creating memorial forests dedicated to victims of road accidents. Each tree bore a plaque engraved with a name and a message of remembrance, turning barren stretches of land into lush green spaces. Families of those lost in accidents often participated in the planting ceremonies, finding comfort in knowing their loved ones would be remembered through nature's beauty. Back in the village, acts of kindness became second nature. Neighbors checked in on one another regularly, ensuring no one felt isolated or overlooked. Strangers passing through were greeted warmly and invited to share meals or stay overnight if needed. Even disagreements, which inevitably arose, were resolved with patience and understanding rather than anger or resentment. Children carry the torch. Perhaps the most enduring change occurred among the children of the village. Having grown up hearing Elias's story, they internalized its lessons in ways that shaped their worldview. Empathy, kindness, and resilience became guiding principles in their lives, influencing everything from how they treated classmates to how they approached challenges. At school, teachers encouraged students to think critically about the world and their role in making it better. Art projects, science fairs, and history lessons all incorporated themes of forgiveness, connection, and community. One group of students created a mural depicting Elias's journey, using bright colors and bold imagery to convey hope and renewal. Another class organized a charity drive, collecting books and supplies for schools in underserved areas. Their enthusiasm was infectious, inspiring older generations to join in their efforts. Even outside the classroom, children embraced the values instilled by Elias's story. Tommy, the boy who painted rocks with uplifting messages, convinced his friends to expand the project. Together, they decorated entire sidewalks with colorful designs and encouraging phrases, transforming mundane paths into works of art. Another group started a kindness club, challenging members to perform at least one act of generosity each day, whether it was helping an elderly neighbor carry groceries or leaving anonymous notes of encouragement. Their actions demonstrated that even small gestures can make a big difference. A village transformed forever. By the end of the decade, the village bore little resemblance to the sleepy, isolated community it had once been. Its people were more open, more connected, and more willing to embrace vulnerability. Strangers passing through remarked on the warmth and kindness of the villagers, noting how eager they seemed to share their stories and make connections. Even the landscape seemed brighter, with wildflowers blooming along roadsides and laughter echoing through the streets. Yet despite these changes, the villagers remained grounded in their roots. They understood that growth didn't mean forgetting where they came from. It meant building upon the foundation laid by those who had walked before them. And in honoring Elias Harper's memory, they ensured that his legacy would live on, not as a tale of sorrow, but as a beacon of hope for generations to come. Elias had carried his secret to the grave, but the truth set free by the rain ultimately healed not only his soul but also the hearts of those who dared to uncover it. Through his pain, they found strength. Through his isolation, they discovered community. And through his longing for forgiveness, they embraced the power of love. In doing so, they proved that even the darkest secrets can lead to light, if only we have the courage to face them. And so the story of Elias Harper came full circle. From a quiet man burdened by guilt to a village united by compassion, his legacy served as a reminder that forgiveness begins within. By choosing to honor his memory, the villagers had discovered the strength to confront their own pain and extend grace to others. In the end, Elias's final gift was not just redemption for himself, but a blueprint for healing the world.